Today on Auction Deal or No Deal, find out how local authority property could become your golden ticket to a multi-million pound development. As always, joined by myself, Jay Howard, Saif Derzi, Omer Mehmet and Piotr Rusinek. And today, if you've missed us, we hope you've missed us, this is now season 2 of Deal or No Deal. That's Auction Deal or No Deal, just in case Channel 4 try and sue us. It's Auction Deal or No Deal, and today it is Saif's turn. And I think Saif has picked something that it's going to ring a couple of bells. It's going to knock on a couple of doors. It's going to make some noise. Saif, what are we looking at? Take away.
Yeah, so this is something that's completely outside of my buy box, okay? Just to be really honest. So this is not something I would normally buy. However, I thought just for the sake of this video, it would make a great discussion because there's so much going on here. So we're looking at a Royal Mail sorting office. It's number 5 Derry Avenue. It's down sort of just on the outskirts of London, South Ockendon, if anyone knows that, RM15 postcode. Now, if you look on the top left, it says by order of Thurrock Council. So for those people that don't know, there is a brilliant BBC documentary about this, a panorama about how Thurrock Council got into £1.5 billion of debt, right? So they got into administration, and there was a man that basically sold them £600 million worth of solar investments, which was basically just, it was a massive Ponzi scheme. And this guy now owns super yachts and cars and all sorts of stuff. But he basically robbed the council of £600 million. That's essentially what happened. It was the most nuts story ever in today's day and age, the amount of corruption we have. So that actually happened. And that was a real life panorama documentary. So please go and watch that. So I assume they're trying to clean up. It's really a sad story because obviously Thurrock Council have had to really strip back the amount of spending they've got on social care, on obviously adult care, on people with disabilities, which is obviously quite disheartening. But because of that, obviously they're having to try and raise as much money as they can to keep things going. So one of it is putting council tax up, and the other one is trying to obviously dispose of assets. So clearly this is one of the assets they've earmarked to basically dispose of. Now, what's interesting is you are buying a freehold. It is a ground rent investment, effectively, for a short period of time. So it's a 19-year ground rent investment. So it's got a lease on it. So it was leased out to Her Majesty's, the Queen basically, previously to her estate until 2042. So that's another 19 years. So effectively, you've got a huge whopping £235 worth of rent on a yearly basis for the next 19 years. But the reality is, the opportunity is you're sat on 0.67 of an acre, which is a huge development opportunity. Because if you look at the buildings around it, you've got a lot of residential buildings around it. You've also got some commercial because it's the end, kind of the end of the main commercial parade. But you've got some higher rise buildings, so probably like 3-4 stories, blocks of flats. So I think where the actual value would be for me on this one is probably looking at it from a development angle. I reckon if you waited 19 years, which I appreciate is a long term, but obviously there's a huge uplift here, I reckon you could easily get around about 18 apartments in the building with some commercial on the ground floor because you need to maintain the commercial parade. And I reckon just looking at the values in the area, it could easily be worth £5-6 million in today's market. God knows how much that's going to be in 19 years' time. But I think this is a long-term play. If you've got some cash to park, this is a long-term play. And there's a lot of family offices. Again, there's a lot of institutional buyers that are looking for these kinds of plays where they can deploy the cash now and obviously reap that huge uplift in the future. And similar to how you have regulated tenancies, the Granger codes and all the rest of it, they're looking really at the uplift in value in a certain amount of time in the future. So for me, I really like the site. I think the site's really good. It's in a really good location. It's close enough to London that it's a good enough value. I'm not saying it's a very high value area, but it's a good area. There's a lot of regeneration happening around that area, generally speaking. And I think in 19 years' time, you can bet your bottom dollar that's going to be a much better area than it is today, and a much higher value area than it is today as well. So for me, I think they've guided it really well. I think £200,000 to £225,000 is a really realistic guide price. I think as ever with councils, with obviously non-profit organisations, they can afford to do that because they're not looking to actually profit from this. They've not bought it to sell it. They've held this for a while and they're just looking to dispose of it. So really it's about trying to sell it and attract as many buyers as possible for it. So I think for me, it's just one of these assets that if you had the cash to deploy and you didn't need it for the next 20 years, rather than putting your money in Bitcoin, whatever people are doing these days, this is probably one of those assets that you'd want to buy and hold basically for the long term. Anyone have any thoughts on this?
So I looked up this on plot map on property data, and in here I can see that the property next door, it's actually flat 1 to 24. So this block is 24 flats. I think if you try to extrapolate it on this plot of land, that looks more like a 50 flat development, which is huge. And we've seen a very similar property also being sold by the council, also with this long lease generating next to nothing. And that was a skate park, I think, in Kent. That sold extremely well. I think that sold, 3 or 4 times the guide price. And I wouldn't be surprised if this property reaches, I'm not going to say what. I'm going to go last. Actually, I'm going to go last.
You've taken all of your going last 3 tokens for the year, Piotr. You are going first when it comes down to deal or no deal.
Unless I keep being right.
Look, there are some really good comments to make about this. There's goods and bads, right? Sometimes you kind of hope that when it's let out for this length of time, that the tenant is a really poor covenant, it's a crappy tenant, and they're not going to want to stay there that length of time. And maybe they want to exit early. You're not going to get that with the Crown. It's just not going to happen. But for a land banker to be buying this in like Ockendon, South Ockendon, the Thurrock kind of area of Essex, it's a good location. And if you have to wait the 19 years making 250 quid a year, you'd swallow that all day long. That's not a problem for you. You don't have to worry about people breaking into your site, doing whatever. You have basically your site guaranteed, your money parked, and having that kind of situation in place. And in that time, you could slowly start ramping up, doing this kind of survey, doing that kind of survey. Obviously not for the next 10 years, but coming up, it's a really good proposition for those that are able to transact at that level. And you probably are looking at family offices, large scale developers. It's probably too small maybe for like a Barratt, but maybe around a Linden home size or a Redwood or Red Brick or whatever they're called. That kind of size, I think that works quite well. And I think the idea of keeping the ground floor commercial is really good, because look at all the residential you have around you where you can service. You can put like a Tesco Express or a Sainsbury's local there, and you can have your 50 to 60 flats above and to the side or whatever. I think this is really good. This kind of really shows the different types of properties that you get at auction and the different types of buyers that it attracts. Is the guide and reserve at the right figure? I think if someone doesn't read this properly, they're going to think they've hit the jackpot. And the amount of times in the past I've seen someone go, look at all that building for 200 grand. And then they realize actually it's let out for a lease for another 20. It just takes one person who misreads the opening sentence or doesn't download the legal pack for there to be a problem here. But I mean, what's not to like about it? I mean, I don't think any of us are land banking and looking at doing £5 to £10 million developments or anything like that. But for that type of buyer, this is good. This is very nice. So that's my comments.
Excellent. I agree with everything you said. A couple of things to add. From a yield perspective, 0.01% yield on your money, a tenth of 1%. That's a cracking investment. I'm sort of looking at this exactly how you guys are. I'm sort of thinking, if you had 250 grand, assuming it could be bought for that sort of money, and there was a bond that you could put your money into for 20 years, where you wouldn't get much of a coupon or an interest on your bond, but at the end of the 20 years, your bond times 20 in value, for example, yeah? And I know you guys have been talking flat numbers, 20 odd. I've heard 50 flats been mentioned here. If we are talking about a 50 flat scheme in 20 years' time, let's remember property prices are going to hopefully be significantly more than they are now. Even if the flats are £400,000 a flat times 50 flats, we're talking about a 20 million GDV, excluding the commercial element. So, valuing the site, if you just get planning in 20 years' time and flip this on, you're talking about £6 to £7 million worth of value just by getting the planning game. So it almost feels like the lottery, doesn't it? If that happens, if you can get planning, I'm assuming you can, but it's the investment for such a long period of time. I was trying to work out how old I'd be in 18 years to see if I'd still have the energy to take on such a development. I'm not sure I'll even be here by then, but it's a real interesting one. But I think that the first thing that came to my mind, and then Jay absolutely ruined it, was if you could have got in and said, "Is 500 grand to the postmaster," and said, "Look, I want you to surrender your lease, and you might be due a payout from the post office at some point anyway. Have another 500 grand from me, and move on." This would have been a cracking investment because you could implement planning straight away, and all of a sudden it's amazing. But I think someone's going to buy it. I'm not sure people are going to realise the value in 20 years unless they really do some homework and some due diligence, or perhaps they watch this episode. But I think it will sell. And I'm going to stick my neck out and say that I think this is going to sell for about £400,000. I think someone will truly see the value. Like Jay said, one of the small scale developers, someone like that, I think will be looking at this site.
Yeah, I think you raised a really interesting point, Omer, because if someone was to take £200,000 and put it into a bond generating 5% and reinvest this 5% every year, this is what someone would get at the end of that 19-year period, £516,000. So if someone spends 200,000 just to buy this building, they're kind of like giving away £316,000 of interest they could have made on something else, because 5% is kind of not impossible right now. And I think that needs to be taken into account. But then there are people who they don't care about the income. What they care about is that capital value and the growth of that kind of pot. And this is guaranteed. This is a guarantee. There's already a big value kind of that can be associated with this at the end of this 19-year period. And this value is going to grow because the prices of properties grow. So I'll say 620,000.
Wow, Piotr went second. For any of those that haven't watched episode 1 from series 2, which is just the episode before this, please go back and do a replay and notice how Piotr stuck his neck out and said it is going to sell for a certain amount, and then came back at the end and said, "Oh, actually, hold on a minute, it's not going to sell." So please do watch that episode back, because we did talk about this offline, and I thought it's only fair that we mention it. So there we go. So I actually think Jay's got a really good point. I think the post office is the best guardian you're going to have guarding this site for you, because obviously they're going to be operational for the next 19 years. I can't see why they wouldn't be. And I also think, so someone that I know really well held a property for 9 years without a single penny of rent, no rent for 9 years. And he sold it for just over double the value that he paid for it. Okay. So he's had a guaranteed uplift in value within that 9-year period. And it wasn't the best 9-year period in terms of property prices anyway. So it was the fact that he locked in the capital. So yeah, it's worthwhile looking at not just the income, but the real future value and the future uplift in things. And I'll stick my neck out and say I think it's going to sell for 641,000. It's just what came to mind, which I calculated it roughly is about 0.00025% of a yield when you look at it from a yield perspective. But I also think it highlights why, as property investors, developers, traders, we shouldn't be focused on a one-dimensional approach to property of this is the yield. We should be looking at things from a very wide 3-dimensional angle of what else is there with that property? What else can you see with that property? So I thought I'd just highlight that point as well. Jay, over to you.
That's dangerously close to my prediction. That's why I always go last.
Okay, I'm gonna be controversial, which is not uncommon for me. I don't.
That doesn't mean you're gonna go 6:30.
Yeah. I don't think this is the best auctioneer for this asset. I don't know how many eyeballs BidX1 are going to draw to something like this. That's not to say BidX1 aren't a good auctioneer, but they are for a certain type of stock, at least in my mind. If this was in an Acuitas / Allsop Starley commercial, I think it would get some more eyeballs, because I think BidX1 do better on housing stock instead of something like this. I don't think their catalogue is going to tell the right story to bring the right buyer, unless someone is purposefully looking for this. They're expecting this to hit the market, and who knows? Some of those family offices / developers know this stuff because of who they talk to. So taking that into consideration, I think this will sell for about 4.
Guys, I think we should seriously consider not posting this on YouTube, this video, right? Let's all chip in 100 grand. I'm sure you've all got 100 grand lying around somewhere. You could just chuck in. That's 400. Let's make a pre-auction offer and we can bank this now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think
to
this
be
is
honest, if
bankable.
we're talking about pension returns, I don't know what my SAS looks like or state pension looks like, but in 20 years' time, I'm going to be knocking on the back door of 60 almost. I think I could go for something like that. I think I could be easily convinced.
Yeah, there was another site as well that they're selling, by the way. Similar kind of site, slightly larger, but I kind of liked this one in terms of positioning. The only reason why I chose this one was the reversion was in 2042. The other one had a reversion in 2050. But on a serious note, though, for anyone that hasn't watched that Panorama documentary, please watch that Panorama documentary. It's one of the best Panorama documentaries I've ever watched. And it's also a great Panorama documentary on understanding how not to do things as well. But it was crazy to me that one person in the council could sign something off to give one person £600 million in investment. Not straight away, but over a period of time. It was nuts. But anyway.
So guys, we have discussed what this will sell for. What would you pay for this property?
Me?
If you were serious about bidding, yes, you.
Yeah,
And
I
you.
would.
And
I
me.
would personally. I mean, this is considering I would look at things from a long-term perspective, right? And obviously considering I've not got loads of cash to deploy on a long-term basis because I'm all about trading, all about turning money over. I would very comfortably play up to 350,000 for this, very comfortably.
I'd want to structure something creatively. Okay, so hope it doesn't sell. I'll offer them. What's the value of a stamp? £1.50. I'll offer them £1.50 now, right, for a 19-year lease option with a premium of 500,000 paid at the end of the 19 years. That would be a great deal.
What part of the council are broke did you not listen to?
You asked me what I wanted to pay for.
Go on, Piotr. What would you pay for it?
I would not buy this. I think there are better things to do with £200,000. I think it's worth 350, 600. I think it's worth it to someone. I don't think I'm the right buyer for this. And if I was to invest 300k or so, I'd want something different, something with much more aggressive growth that will 10x by 20 years.
Okay, so I have one condition upon my being willing to buy this or not, regardless of value, is if there is an overage that's put into the transfer deed, part of the legal pack, where there is they want 25% on any planning value add in the next 80 years or something, that is severely going to affect the amount of money that I would pay for this. Now, we haven't looked at that. We haven't discussed that yet. But let's assume that there isn't an anti-embarrassment overage, clawback, whatever you want to call it, provision in the legal pack. If there isn't, of my good earned money, for the sake of a pension in 20 years' time, they could have 100,000 of my smackaroos, which puts me right out of the race. And I know that, but and if there was an overage for the next 25, 50, 80 years, then they can get the £1.50 that Omer was talking about, and they can
Wow.
enjoy that for the rest of their life.
So we went from zero We went from 0 to £1.50 to 100 grand. What a bunch of cheapskates. There we go.
We're probably not the marketplace for this, in fairness, Saif. But
No, I
look,
know.
for
You can
100
have it,
grand,
Saif.
yeah, it's all yours. It's all yours.
But
At
one thing I'll
350,
say,
you're a good buyer.
one thing I'll say, which is really interesting as well with this, is it goes to show you the mindset of someone that is quite experienced and that's a trader or whatever, because you're looking at trying to create more money than the uplift of it. This is more suited for someone that just wants to sit back and do nothing, which is fair enough. And there's a lot of people out there, and that has the cash to deploy. Whereas we are thinking about, I want to just try and turn my money as quickly as possible, and I can turn it way quicker, make way more than in 19 years' time what you can get an uplift from this, which is going to be quite big anyway, which is interesting.
But given Omer's point earlier on, if we were to say we'd happily buy this for 200 grand, that's 50k each. Between the four of us and our skill set, could we wait 20 years, and at the completion of 20 years, could we create a planning opportunity for 30 to 50 units? I'm going to put my hand up and say yes. I believe between the four of us, we can pull that off.
Yeah.
Outside
also,
of that, I'm not interested.
Yeah, but also that's why we do, I've still got things from a long-term perspective, whether it's equities, whatever it is, that I'm kind of just setting and forgetting, and I'll look at in 20, 30, 40 years' time. And this is one of those things that would sit in that portfolio in that way. So it's not really looked at from a liquidity point of view. It's looked at more from a long-term, I'll just put this away and forget about it.
This is a post office coin. Produces no income, and in the end, it's going to make you rich.
If you truly believe in the power of capital appreciation, then this is the deal for you.
Yeah,
True.
I did mention at the start, this is not my buy box whatsoever, but look what it did. It created a brilliant conversation. So yeah, what an episode it was.
Absolutely.
Amazing, guys. Okay, let us know what you think about our comments. Let us know what you think this is going to sell for, or what you would like to buy this property for. Amazing. Subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.